Welcome to the All Evidence Review. This is Ashton Forbes of MH370x. We have a big team of people that have behind the scenes been putting in a lot of work, and this thing has been picking up. We have been going viral. We have been trending with MH370 and MH370x recently. So I want to thank everybody, followers, supporters out there who have been making sure that this story, that these videos do not fade. I think that we are potentially dealing with the largest verifiable conspiracy of all time, potentially the most important videos of all time as well. And what we are talking about here are two videos that reemerged on the subreddit UFOs back on August 7th or 8th, depending on your time zone, that have been proven to be on the Internet Archives dating all the way back to 2014. The first video, which is referred to as Satellite Video, Airliner and UFOs, has a received date, March 12th, 2014. Uploaded date, or published date, if you want to think of it as that, May 19th, 2014. The source says protected on it. This information is very relevant because it sets us a window of time of opportunity to be very narrow, between 4 days and 72 days for production of these videos. The second video that was released, again, by Rediside Anon, and there may be earlier versions, but these are the earliest ones we've been able to find now almost 10 years later, is the archived MQ-1C Gray Eagle with a thermal layer added with a Raytheon multispectral electro-IR camera. This version has a received June 5th, uploaded June 12th date on it. So the window of opportunity for this one, it appears as the first video, they potentially had to be convinced that what they were looking at was real or what they were looking at all. And then the second video, the time frame is only 1 week after they received that second video. Now, the requirements to understand these videos to even be authentic, we had to have several things even to get to the point we're at today in 2023 to understand the videos to be real. We had to see the 2017 DoD Navy UAP videos that were declassified that show drone FLIR, forward-looking infrared. The videos that we see in our MQ-1C Gray Eagle has the HUD data, that the numbers and everything that you see on there removed. And it has this thermal custom layer that is from the software added in over the top of it. Without these videos, we wouldn't even know what military footage would look like unless you worked in the military on these type of equipment. We needed the Trump satellite image from 2019 that he posted on Twitter, which showed an Iranian, I believe it was a missile silo or a rocket launch that we had attacked or destroyed. And the satellite image had been reverse engineered that the data came from USA 224, which was sent up in 2011. This is relevant because we have also been able to figure out that USA 229, with its sister satellite, was in the correct location at the correct time to send the data that we need in our satellite video. Now, we can see similar resolution capabilities in that Trump satellite image, which is very important. A lot of people thought that Trump picture had to be fake because they expected more atmospheric distortion. And what we've come to uncover is there's a system called SBIRS, Space-Based Infrared System. And that this system is essentially a Google Earth video playback, global persistent surveillance monitoring. That the Trump picture is most likely just a still from that system. And it is sending data, and it's not actually looking through the satellites, sending data to a computer program that's able to build that Google Earth video playback. We also needed advanced theoretical physics concepts that have only emerged from 2020 and beyond. Macroscopic quantum coherence, Bose-Einstein condensates, and then the wormhole papers, which tell us that to induce a wormhole, we don't necessarily need exotic matter, that they could be humanly traversable, meaning that if a human were to go through a wormhole, the gravitational effects are not going to kill them. And then lastly, which is very important with respect to the science we're going to be discussing, is that you might be able to create a double-sided electromagnetic barrier around an object that would allow it to transport through a wormhole without being destroyed. We also need to understand superconductivity, more importantly, room temperature superconductivity, which became part of the zeitgeist in the last few months from LK99, which is a metamaterial produced from copper and lead that when cooked together, theoretically will produce a room temperature superconductive state. Now, what we are going to present is an alternative hypothesis that we don't need metamaterials to induce room temperature superconductivity. That's what we've come to learn as part of the investigation, talking to scientists and engineers like Salvatore Pais. But without that, we would not be able to understand the requirements in order for the orbs in our videos to be floating. Lastly, we needed to understand AI, advanced computer processing, advanced computer programs. We believe that in our both of our videos, we're not seeing any types of beings or humans inside these orbs. These are being either remotely controlled or controlled by a computer program. That is why we see this 120-degree, 0-point sinusoidal pattern as these orbs traverse around the airplane, using the airplane as the center of mass. We also potentially need quantum computers to be able to store all this information that they are processing to fulfill the role and purpose that they are conducting. Now, going to the videos, starting with the video facts. The videos have been proven to date back to 2014 from the archives, as well as people who saw them, including myself. I saw the drone footage, the colorized one. I had no idea what I was looking at back in 2014. This is why I got very interested when I saw the footage recently in August. I said, oh, I remember seeing that. And then when I saw the second video, this is one of the first times ever when I had seen any types of UAP videos over the last 6 years that I had seen two different videos from different perspectives of the same exact event. The satellite video has perspective changes 8 different times in it. Part of the reason why it's hard to see the cloud movement is the perspective changes 8 times, so each perspective is only a few seconds. We can see satellite coordinates in the bottom left visible in 6 of those perspectives. Those satellite coordinate shifts prove the location is in the Nicobar Islands. Even if you were able to invert or mirror the footage, you would not be able to invert or mirror the satellite shifts. Those satellite shifts indicate that the plane is going generally in a south and then eastern direction. This means that the location cannot be in the South Indian Ocean, assuming that we were somehow able to add a minus sign. It has to be in the Nicobar Islands. In our satellite footage, we see 2 perspectives, or 2 side-by-side videos. These are not duplicated. This is 3D stereoscopic video, which would require 2 satellites in close proximity on the same orbital trajectory. We have recreated the orbital trajectories of USA 229, which have this criteria met, that are in the right location in the Nicobar Islands, staring down at the agreed-upon flight path of the plane at 1840 UTC in the exact location where the plane supposedly turned into the South Indian Ocean. The MQ-1C Gray Eagles, a General Atomics make. We actually have somebody who knows the experts in General Atomics and says that they believe that this is exactly what these drones look like. The MQ-1C Thermal is added using this advanced electro-IR camera from Raytheon. The purpose for SBIRS, Space-Based Infrared System, and SIGINT, Signals Intelligence, is tracking boats, planes, electronic signals monitoring, intelligence, and battlefield awareness. Alternative sources exist in higher quality that were posted later online that point to none of the users being the original source. There's a hole that forms in the cloud to the left of the plane in the satellite video after the zap, which is very small, but could be that something has flown through the hole there, or could be something else related to our event. The video coordinates in them change, but they don't change when the mouse moves. It only changes when the perspective moves. This is important because this indicates that there's a second analog being used to move around the coordinates in our videos. The video coordinates also have a satellite designation next to them, NROL 22. NROL 22 is USA 184, which was sent up in space in 2006, which is consistent with the first time the SBIRS system was brought online. NROL 22 has a Millennia orbit. The Millennia orbits are useful for relaying electronic communications. So we believe that this is our command satellite, one of the first ones sent up in space related to this system. The mouse in our satellite video moves off the screen both in the bottom left and in the top right, indicating a large field of view. The SBIRS system is viewing custom video software. It displays only coordinates with 2 axes, indicating we're tracking the ground. It's not looking at the plane in space, otherwise we would have a Z coordinate axis. The satellite video is in 6 frames per second, indicative of a high field of view, which requires more resources in order to render it. The plane is making a left-hand turn and descending in both videos, consistent with the maximum capabilities of a 777-200. This is some of the most difficult part to fake, according to a VFX expert that claimed to have worked on Top Gun Maverick. The plane's altitude is low, based on how close they are to the cumulus clouds, which only form between 1,000 and 5,000 feet. The MQ-1C drone is cropped out of the satellite video just at the top of the field of view. The user closes the window in the satellite video after the plane disappears, indicating that this was actually not recorded in real time, that they came back and they recorded this later on to leak it to us. Googling the SIG-INT payload, quote unquote, the top hit references the MQ-1C Gray Eagle, which is our drone. Regicide Anon defended the veracity of the videos in the later uploaded videos by other users. When the drone video zooms in, we can see that the clouds change size and there's clear parallax. The drone is most likely deployed from either Car Nicobar or Port Blair, and the direction of travel is consistent with the angle of the camera view from the drone video. We believe the Raytheon camera is an AN-DAS2 electro-IR camera that has the capability of onboard software that can add the thermal rainbow palette that we see. Now, some additional speculation. We speculate that the Sibber system is producing this video using the data from USA 229. It could also be using other data, as we've shown from the Sibbers video. It is using geostationary satellites that are constantly scanning the whole Earth, Millennial orbit satellites that are relaying information, and low Earth orbit satellites that can get very high quality data that is high resolution. The smoking gun is USA 229. Again, at the right location, time, apparent angle with sister debris satellite capable of taking stereoscopic video at 1840 UTC in the Nicobar Islands. The cameras on both of these equipments are made for filming these events. The original source may have come from a private forum. The mouse acceleration that we see when the mouse moves is consistent with a plural view 3D mouse with stealth or soft mouse 3D controllers. It could also be some type of trackball or some type of laptop center button as well. The key point being there's an acceleration there that is different from standard mouse acceleration that we see. The screen capture of the terminal is running at 30 frames per second. There's a Citrix terminal running at a default of 24 frames per second, streaming a remote virtual desktop at a resolution of 24 frames per second. This we can see from the mouse, which is at 24 frames per second, and then it's remotely navigating around this very large resolution field of view that's playing at 6 frames per second. What this all means is that somebody was actually logged into the actual database, doing a screen recording while in the Citrix session, looking at that background. They weren't using a camera, and they were not using a camera phone or anything like that. What this also means is that the leaker of these videos was likely caught and went to prison because this information would be logged. The leaker was likely a U.S. military operator who saw the event in real time and had emotional reaction. Now, what it would take to fake these videos. First of all, I want to start by saying we have a $145,000 bounty, $100,000 put in by Kim.com, $20,000 put up by the Investigate Earth podcast, Chad and Sherry, and $25,000 put in by an anonymous follower who is clearly wealthy and ran for higher office once before. And I've verified their identity, but I'm not going to make that public at this time. The requirements to collect this money is that you need to find the supposed hoaxer of these masterpiece videos, and you need to provide the source material. They would not have produced this final product in the first try. They would have had to have an entire hard drive filled with their work efforts leading up to it, and all you have to do is bring that with proof that that stuff comes from 2014 prior to these videos. Now, in order to create the videos, you would only have between 4 and 72 days to create them. Whether or not you believe that the Regicide Anon receive date of March 12th is accurate, or if you believe that somehow Regicide Anon lied on the receive date or is somehow implicated in the cover in the hoax, then that would be May 19th, which is the confirmed published date of the satellite video. There's no reference to copy from. This is very important. You see a lot of people promoting a fake VFX debunk out there saying they can convert the VFX into our video. If somebody created this, they would not have that luxury. So what those people would be required to do is, if you want to confirm you could do it, go ahead and take that VFX without looking at our videos, try to blindly convert it into the effect that we see in our video. This is essentially equivalent to taking a monkey and giving them a typewriter and waiting until they're able to produce Shakespeare. So this is a very difficult event. This is not a situation where you're copying the Mona Lisa. You'd have nothing to compare it to. You would have to know how to create these realistic volumetric clouds that we've talked about, how to accurately animate the cameras that we see, how the clouds form at low altitude because we have these cumulus clouds out there. You would have to know how to accurately light the volumetric clouds. The zap that we see in the satellite video accurately illuminates the clouds in the foreground and in the background, which I'll say right now, we speculatively believe that that's because the electrons in the area are being energized by the event. You'd have to be able to recreate exactly what MH370 looks like. You'd have to know what the turn radius of a Boeing 777 is at a certain altitude while in descent. You have to know where the plane would have been at the exact time. Accurate coordinate shifts relative to the location to 5 decimal places. How to animate those coordinate shifts. What the weather was like in the Nicobar Islands, because we've proven that it was accurate low altitude clouds in the area. How to accurately create the smoke trailing the plane using particles in both videos. What the thermal looks like at a level that would fool the experts. How to animate the heat signature in the AC units that we believe are showing the heat signature in the belly of the plane. They would have to have knowledge of military classified systems completely unknown to the public. That the military is using a Citrix environment. You would have to know the frame rate difference captured by or created by capturing the satellite footage during a Citrix session. You'd have to know the specialized mouse that they're using relative to that acceleration we discussed. What satellites the U.S. has in operation and what their payload is. You'd have to know what false color IR looks like. A lot of people have wondered, why is the satellite video show this zap in a white effect? That's because we're not looking at thermal there. We're looking at an IR camera in false color IR at nighttime that is able to produce it in whatever visual color spectrum they want. Because the purpose there is not for that detailed information like we have in our drone. The purpose there is for battlefield awareness and monitoring. You'd have to know how to create the 3D stereoscopic imagery we see in the satellite video, how to animate the orbs, how to create the particle system for the orbs and their forward-facing gravity engine where they're creating their own geodesics, how to animate the final frames where the orbs flatten, showing a gravitational lensing effect, and the plane blurs, showing acceleration. You'd have to know what the MQ-1C drone even looks like, what the payload on that drone is, where the payload is located to get the exact camera angle. You'd have to have better VFX skills than the lead VFX artist of Top Gun Maverick, who said that this person would have front-ran their work by 4 years, and that the hardest part is recreating the actual capabilities of the plane to scale. Marvel VFX expert says it would take at least 6 months, 4 to 6 months with today's technology. That's Jeffrey Ford. Better understanding of physics than most PhDs. You'd have to have an understanding of advanced mathematics, including the sinusoidal patterns that we see from the orbs. And then, sort of as a joke, to be coy, you'd have to know how not to use low-quality 90s video game 2-dimensional VFX in a 3D rendered environment. You'd also then have to know that we would never find a plane even 9.5 years later, otherwise the entire hoax would break down. Now the flight path. Let's talk a little bit about that. Now I want to start by noting that we started by trusting all the official data and systematically ruled it out as not factual or itself riddled with inconsistencies. I will add that I read all 300 pages of the Whisper Route, all 300 of them, and I initially trusted it to be true. And if you go back to my earlier spaces, you'll find that I was never comfortable with the information in the Whisper Route after the radar data went away. It is essentially nonsensical. I don't think that a plane would be hugging the coast. That's not how you avoid radar. I don't think it would do a cut back to see if anyone's behind it, nor do I think that that would even be able to be deduced from this type of radar, from these types of pings. The most important part that I thought was silly is that the Whisper Route has this plane doing a holding pattern, which is very obvious that what happened here is they didn't have a way to explain why there wasn't any additional pings, so they just said, oh, it must be sitting in a holding pattern. The more logical answer is that the data after 1840 UTC is not accurate, either or misinterpreted or potentially spoofed. So we lost trust with that Whisper data and the Inmarsat pings after 1840 UTC, which is the location and time that we believe that our satellite videos are occurring. The satellite pings switched to IOR at 1559 UTC, 30 minutes before the plane takes off, and never switched back to POR despite the plane flying east towards it. What do I mean by this? There are two satellites that Inmarsat could be pinging. One in the Indian Ocean and one over the Pacific near Japan. Even though this plane is flying towards the POR satellite, it never pings it ever again. This is important because what happens is now we lose the capability to triangulate the position of the plane. If we have pings from two different satellites, we can tell exactly where the plane is at any given point in time. With just one ping, this means that we have to use an arc to determine its location. The plane goes east until 1721 UTC, and the plane should have pinged that POR, but it never did. The pilot says, "Good night, MH370 at 1719 UTC." This is 1:19 in the morning. 64 seconds later, 1721 UTC, the plane disappears from all civilian radar due to both ADS-B and ACARS data being shut off. 1730 UTC, last radar contact, according to the transport minister from one of the press conferences. Radar says that the plane makes an impossible altitude changes from 5,000 to 55,000 feet, meaning that the radar data, including the altitude data, becomes unreliable because the plane cannot make those types of altitude changes. The plane can't even go to 55,000 feet. The radar data was not released for weeks, but yet it was sent to the Americans within 5 days, according to the press conference we found. The armed forces knew much earlier that the aircraft could have turned back, and that is why the search was expanded to include the Straits of Malacca within a day or two. And yet they still continued to search in the South China Sea for days after the event, wasting resources knowing that this plane had turned around because they had it on military radar. The military did not confirm this until much later due to resistance from senior officers and government needing to step in. "Quote unquote, we wasted our time in the South China Sea." The defense minister claims they knew it was a civilian airliner, but they didn't know it was MH370. The same defense minister claims that they knew it was civilian somehow, but it was not hostile. The only way this makes any sense is if they had communication with the plane, because otherwise you could not rule out a hijacking scenario or even a rogue pilot scenario. In order to know it's not hostile, you would have to have had some communication with them. I will add as well that the same defense minister argued with an interviewer who questioned why they didn't send up jets. And he said, "Well, would you send them up to shoot it down?" Which she says, "Well, I didn't say that, you did." And he asked, "Well, why would we send up the jets?" And she says, "To track the plane. Especially if you have a rogue plane, why wouldn't you send it up there?" And that seems to be the most logical course. Now, why did they not send the plane up? Potentially because they knew it was an emergency event. Therefore, they knew they didn't need to send a plane up. It was not a hostile situation. The plane changes directions when it goes dark. It heads directly to Penang Langkawi Airport, the closest airport that can accommodate a 777 in an emergency. There's a Wired article out there that says that this would arguably be the correct correct decision in an electrical fire. When the plane gets to Penang, the co-pilot's cell phone pings a local cell phone tower. Now, we have speculated that it may be that the lights on the runway were turned off. If the lights on the runway were turned off, it would not have been safe to land. It could also be possible that if the plane was on fire, the landing gear could have been damaged. And it could be possible as well that they couldn't dump fuel and land on their belly because of the fire on board the plane. The last Malaysian military radar is between 1815 or 1822 UTC, 200 to 230 miles west by northwest of Penang. But reports the next day had indicated that the loss of contact from Subang ATC was at 1840 UTC, which is the location and time of our videos. There's anomalous ping data at 1839 UTC and subsequent limited data for the 5 hours afterwards. This was first reported by myself. Now, why does this plane not crash into the South Indian Ocean? No debris field found. That's the biggest piece. You can't not have a debris field for a 777 crashing into the South Indian Ocean. We should have found it the very next day. We had satellites everywhere. We were even able to find the Wagner Chiefs or General's jet that had crashed, which is much smaller than the 777. Most expensive search in history and most extensive search in history did not find a single piece of the plane above or below water. There was no black boxes found, despite them being able to produce a signal for 30 days at depths of 20,000 feet at a very specific frequency that cannot be misidentified. The SOSA system would have heard it like they heard the Titan sub pop where the Navy said nothing for 5 days while oxygen counters were running on television. Western Australia and Diego Garcia both have hydrophones that also did not have any acoustic detections. Indonesia, as well as Australia, and now we're also adding India, have radar systems that should have seen the plane either turning into the South Indian Ocean or flying in the South Indian Ocean. None of them did. It's an active shipping route. There's no witnesses that saw the plane there, despite supposedly crashing in the morning in the daylight hours. Some people might argue the ocean is really big. Well, the official flight path has it running out of gas with fuel exhaustion. There's actually nowhere else for this plane to go. The official searched everywhere along the final arc, along the flight path, in the South Indian Ocean, Malacca Straits, Andaman Sea, and South China Sea. The initial narrative claimed that this plane did a 90-degree swan dive, which is not possible for a plane. And even if it had, it would have exploded when it crashed into the ocean like that. It's not going to go flying or pouring right through the water and not break apart. This was very quietly later to a 14-degree change. None of the redundant ELT beacons, there's 4 of them, activated on crash, despite the fact that they should have. 19 families of victims signed a statement saying they could call the cell phones for up to 4 days of the victims. One of them even proved it on national television. A CNN expert went on and claimed that, this could happen because it might be pinging the old cell tower. Well, not for 4 days, and not for 19 of them. In fact, those cell towers only go out into the ocean several miles. And if a phone is underwater for about 30 minutes in the salt water, it's going to die. And after it's under a few feet of water, you're not going to be able to get a radio frequency signal anymore. Some social media sites also had the passengers still being online. Now, some may argue, well, what about the debris? We did find some debris, right? Well, again, I just want to reiterate, no debris found by the official search above or below water. That's a fact. The debris that was found by people not related to the official search. They searched with at least 42 planes and 39 boats from over 10 different countries, and they found nothing. The debris that was found, and only 3 pieces had been confirmed tied to MH370, is consistent with a fire and teleportation event that we've put forth from this advanced science. Some of the debris that was found actually even had scorch marks on it. And the debris that had scorch marks had a honeycomb consistent with a Boeing airplane. There was even a B777 fire suppression device that washed up in the Maldives several weeks after the event. That didn't go reported didn't get investigated even though it has a serial number on it. The flaperon, the piece that essentially set the narrative that this plane had crashed into the ocean, was not matched with the unique serial number. The unique serial plate was missing despite it being screwed in to the flaperon. So this piece could be from MH370, but there was also an exact replica, a 9M MRK, that was purchased by GA Telesis, scrapped in October of 2013, just 6 months before the plane went missing. It's an exact same model as MH370, also purchased from Malaysia Airlines. So it's possible that the flaperon could have been from a similar plane that has similar part. Now, why is this MH370, some might ask, which I think is probably the least controversial aspect of all of this. It's the only missing 777. The thermal is an exact match of the silhouette of a 777-200ER. This is actually the banner in my Twitter profile. The color tone matches MH370, or matches Malaysian Airlines. It's white on the top, dark on the bottom, which we can see from the satellite. Satellite coordinates actually put it on the real agreed-upon flight path of MH370 at around 1840 UTC in the Nicobar Islands. Again, this is the smoking gun. Note, this is the suspected location of the turn into the South Indian Ocean once again. I'm going to repeat that. Purpose of SIGINT, Signals Intelligence, and SIBRs is to track airplanes just like this. U.S. government had to be tracking a rogue 777 in a post-9/11 world. The Malaysian Minister of Defense, in the Day 5 press conference, is asked, U.S. spy satellites are in the regions. Have we have contact with them? To which he replies, yes, yes. The U.S. military has been proven to have the satellites in the air. We've proven that conclusively. And we have the U.S. military confirming that SIBRs provided data to the intelligence community to help solve the mystery of MH370. I ask you, how did they solve that mystery? Now, let's debunk the suicide myth, despite the fact that I think that it not crashing into the South Indian Ocean already debunks the suicide myth. Everyone stood up for the pilot, Zaharie, including officials, wife, and coworkers. 18,000 flight hours. He loved his job, extremely experienced pilot. There's no indication of suicidal intent anywhere in the flight path. A similar suicidal event, Germanwings 2015. Pilot crashed the plane within 10 minutes of locking out the co-pilot. If it was suicidal, he would have crashed the plane immediately, not gone on an 8-hour joyride. The crew oxygen has 1 or 2 oxygen tanks at a 100% flow. The estimates of this oxygen lasting are between 30 and 120 minutes. Not long enough for an 8-hour joyride. There are several ways to enter the cockpit, including a keypad override, disabling the electronics bay, and panels that break out when the plane depressurizes to equalize the pressure. Captain Bellany suggested that whoever was in command of the aircraft would have had intentionally disconnected all 4 electrical generators and APU simultaneously. Practically impossible for a single person to disconnect all 4 generators within 64 seconds. Zaharie was actually rostered to fly MH370 to Jeddah on February 4th, 2014. The route in his simulator closely matches MH370 to Jeddah, with a diversion potentially to the South Pole or South Indian Ocean. What this means is that the indication that he practiced the flight path for this route is false. Flying over your hometown, Penang, is silly. The flight path indicates an emergency event, not a suicidal event. The passenger oxygen mask would only last for about 25 minutes. So in order to keep the passengers alive, they would have to fly low, which we'll talk about when we talk about our witnesses. The narrative, again, of running out of fuel is contrary to a suicide event. Suicide, you would crash the plane immediately. You're not going to have it run out of gas. Now, why is this a lithium-ion battery fire? 221 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries put together the same day the plane took off. The batteries skipped 2 security screenings. This is 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries in the cargo bay. The fire event is corroborated by 19 witnesses. The cargo compartment bays were designed to withstand flame source of 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit or over 900 degrees Celsius for at least 5 minutes. A lithium-ion battery fire could escape containment from the cargo compartment. The fire cannot be extinguished by the cargo containment's halon fire suppression system. There's a heat signature that we see near the exhaust panels by the landing gear. The AC units may be flushing smoke from the plane. Smoke trails coming from the back of the plane in both videos. Altitude, again, is too low for contrails. I have a source who has experience testifying on Capitol Hill, who's willing to confirm that the plane could last for over an hour while battling the fire. The batteries may have been packaged unsafely based on the ATSB report pictures. The B777 fire suppression device that washed up in the Maldives could be connected to MH370 and could be one of the fire suppression devices they were using to mitigate the ion battery fire. The key witness, Catherine T., had a sighting of a glowing orange plane consistent with a chemical reaction from the halon fire extinguishing devices releasing bromine, which is a halogen gas that glows orange. There's a mayday at 2:43 a.m., only reported in Chinese news. 2:43 a.m. is converted to Malaysian time, is 18:43 UTC, within 3 minutes of we think our videos happened, of an intercepted communication from MH370 that the plane is, quote-unquote, attempting an emergency landing and disintegrating, which is consistent with our videos, consistent with the event we've put forth, and the witness. The FAA changed the rules to no longer allow lithium-ion batteries in the cargo of passenger planes in 2015, just 1 year after the event of MH370. Even after this, there's more than 1 lithium-ion battery fire in passenger planes per week in the United States. Covering up the fire event is only explained by the technology that was deployed. Otherwise, there'd be no reason to cover up such a mundane event. Now, the main witness, Catherine T., she had a blog post in 2014 and another blog post in 2018. Her sighting was recreated by automatic GPS. I spoke to her personally a few months ago, and she told me that she thought her sighting was at 1840 UTC. She told me she felt pressured by the experts to change the time of her sighting. In her sighting, the plane was descending from the beginning to the end of the sighting. The plane was flying low and it was recreated to be between 2,000 and 10,000 feet. The glowing plane had no navigation lights, meaning the power was potentially still out. She saw 2 other planes with navigation lights at cruising altitude. Her sighting lasted between 5 and 10 minutes. The plane had an orange glow, as we've discussed. She also saw black smoke resembling a contrail coming out of the plane. She could not see any fire or flames, consistent with our videos where we do not see any active fire. I asked her about the silhouette. She said the silhouette of the plane matched the thermal from MH370. She did not see any other boats in the area, though she mentioned to me that if the lights had been off in the boats, she would not have been able to see them because it was essentially pitch black. She did not have her radio on to hear Mayday calls. She went in to put the kettle on, and when she came back out, the plane was no longer there anymore, and all she saw was an orange halo. The recreation of the sighting has the plane circling around the boat in a counterclockwise location coming from the east, consistent with the direction of travel of the videos and the direction of travel of the known flight path of the plane. Now, all the other witnesses. Mike McKay sees the plane on fire at roughly 1720 UTC within 1 minute where the plane goes dark. He sees it low on the horizon from roughly 300 miles away at the maximum distance, likely due to the fact that it just rained, making it perfect conditions to see as far as he could. He sees it on fire for 5 to 10 seconds and then it stops. His sighting is misreported as he'd seen the plane crash. He later on says clearly that he did not see the plane crash. That was just an assumption that he was making. People along the coast of the South China Sea hear loud noises at the same time, roughly 1720 UTC. This is going to be consistent with lithium-ion battery fires exploding, those 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries in the cargo. 10 minutes after the plane goes dark, there are 8 fishermen, 10 miles off the coast of the South China Sea that see an unusually low-flying plane. This would be consistent with the pilots trying to fly low to give the passengers enough oxygen to be able to breathe in a depressurization event, completely counter to the official narrative that the pilot would have been trying to suffocate the passengers. There's also communication at 1730 UTC received by an unnamed 777 pilot going to Tokyo claiming to hear the MH370 pilot or co-pilot. This casts doubt on whether or not communications were really disabled. There's a Chinese hack. China actually released satellite images which appear to show 3 orbs. The official explanation is that these pictures came 1 day after the disappearance and that they were of the South China Sea. However, they searched in the South China Sea and did not find any debris. It is speculated that this could be spycraft, that China was telling the United States, we know that you did something. We checked the satellite, and the satellite actually would have been able to see the location in the Nicobar Islands of our videos. The same day, March 9th, China hacks the Malaysian government, stealing crisis minutes as well as classified information on MH370. I can't understand why there would be classified information on MH370 the day after the plane goes missing, unless China knew there was a cover-up at play. Other pertinent information relative to the case. 2 fake passengers using stolen passports that changed their appearance, Iranian nationals. Supposedly, the cover story is they were trying to find asylum and head to Amsterdam from Kuala Lumpur. But it doesn't make any sense that they would be flying to Beijing. This just increases the risk. There are direct flights directly to Amsterdam. They were spending enough money that it wouldn't have mattered trying to save money either. The satellite coordinates only indicate the Nicobar Islands because the videos predate the South Indian Ocean narrative. On March 13th, 2014, 1 day after the received date on our Reddit site anon video, unnamed U.S. officials started leaking information to the media stating that MH370 flew into the South Indian Ocean. They started to build a narrative. Sibbers builds 3D battlefield which ignores satellite movements. Some people wonder why the satellites are not moving. Again, same reason why when you're looking at Google Earth, you don't see the satellites move. Because it's taking data and building it in through a computer program. Satellites can see in the dark, false color IR. Total darkness, moon was down, sun was set. There's no shadows visible in our satellite video. The zap, again, indicates nighttime because we can see this zap accurately illuminate the clouds in the foreground and in the background from our satellite video. If it was daytime, we most likely would not see that zap or the illumination come from it very clearly at all. The White House was calling Malaysia every single day after the event, despite the fact there was only one American passenger on board. Obama visited in April, and this was the first time in 50 years that an American president had visited Malaysia. He spent several days there. I had a source that reached out to me that I deleted this post to protect the source, and the source mentioned that there's a general who was in charge at the time who was shown the videos by their nephew and reacted in a way that confirmed their authenticity. This general went on to be promoted to be the highest ranked military officer, despite the fact that we never found anything about the plane, was advisor to the president, joint chiefs of staff, the secretary of defense, and then later on went on to be board of directors at Lockheed Martin. Rolls-Royce silence. In the same video where the Minister of Defense admits that spy satellites were in the region and they have been in contact with them, also admits that Rolls-Royce had engine data and says that they were in communication with Rolls-Royce about that. Rolls-Royce has never released this data publicly. Both engines transmit data, and there was a source in one of my replies that I believe mentioned that this data is transmitting every few seconds. So Rolls-Royce would have the data that would either confirm or dispel the conspiracy. ACAR's data sets were really the only footprints left after the ADSB and ATC radar data and audio were lost. So it became very difficult to find and track this plane. Now the motive. I know a lot of you guys want to know, why would you do this? Okay. 20 Freescale Semiconductor scientists and engineers on board. Freescale Semiconductors broke off from Motorola, which is the ones who actually owned the batteries that were on board the plane, in 2004. 20 people flying in the same plane from the same company breaks almost every company's policies for exactly situations like this. This plane was likely doomed. It couldn't land at Penang for whatever reason. Landing in the ocean would have broken apart the plane, and most likely everybody would have drowned in the middle of the night. We found a 2005 National Security Agency report on commercial room temperature superconductivity development chips that references Freescale Semiconductors 9 times. This report also says in it that this technology could be available by 2010 or 2012, but only if the U.S. government provides funds to make it happen. Freescale Semiconductors also launched a major initiative dedicated to serving RF power needs of the U.S. aerospace and defense sector, directly tying these engineers and scientists to the U.S. defense. So the motives then are possibly preventing the intellectual property from going to China, if this is somehow an espionage event that was set up from the beginning and the fire was started intentionally. It could also be preventing the loss of this intellectual property that is directly related to the technology we see deployed. It could also be testing the technology on a doomed plane, as many podcasters have speculated to me personally. Now the orb analysis. We see 3 orbs in our video approaching the plane at estimated Mach 3 speeds. They are using superconductivity, room temperature superconductivity, potentially, in order to obtain quantum properties and ignore gravity. If you reduce your mass to 0, then gravity, you're no longer affected by gravity. We see a non-radiating barrier around the orbs. This is the field, essentially like a bubble underwater, that is displacing them from space-time. They're generating their own geodesics, possibly by an accelerated vibration through a pulse current, as explained in Salvatore Pais' patents. The dark cold lines are in front of the orbs, not behind the orbs. There's no visible known propulsion mechanism that we can see in the videos. The dark lines may be changing the pressure of the atmosphere. The heat signatures in the orbs are actually spinning on their axis. The orb triangle pattern is consistent with a 3-phase sinusoidal 440-volt electrical system at 120 degrees that creates a 0 point at the center. Sinusoidal waves, Tipler cylinders, are predicted to produce sinusoidal distortions in space-time, emitting gravitational waves in a repeating wave pattern. The orb's pattern encircles the plane over time. We believe this could be mapping the plane or preparing it for what's about to occur. That orb pattern changes to become a vertical ring around the plane before the phase transition begins. The phase transition occurs as the orbs bend and move towards the plane in the final frame. We can see gravitational lensing in the frame before the phase transition, as well as we can see the plane accelerating in blur. So why is this teleportation, or superluminal speeds as I'll refer to it, moving faster than the speed of light? We see the plane disappear from space-time instantly in both videos. The zap is a cold endothermic event in the thermal, meaning it's an absorption of energy. This is not a release of energy like an exothermic event that we would see. Again, this is a transitional phase state change. It's not a black hole because nothing gets sucked in. It's not cloaking because the smoke trail stops when the plane disappears. E equals mc squared rules out annihilation because the mass and energy has to go somewhere. Teleportation could be to another dimension, planet, future, or just another point on Earth, which is what we have speculated. We cannot break causality, travel to the past, unless you were to change timelines or dimensions. Otherwise, you would have the paradox of, killing one of your parents before you were born. But time dilation is real. You can travel to the future. You can also potentially hold the plane in superposition where it could be released at a later point in time, according to physics. There may be limitations to this technology. It may not be unlimited. You may need an open area, i.e. an object in the air, in order to pull this off. The teleportation may be to hide the plane. It may be to put out the fire, because this cold endothermic event can absorb energy. Runaway lithium-ion battery fires are so dangerous because they have a huge amount of latent energy. And this is why when you put them out, they keep coming back up and up and up again. Because the victims of the families' phones were ringing, this makes it most likely that the plane was still somewhere on Earth in the 4 days after the event. Now let's dig a little bit into the science, at least my favorite part. The double slit experiment is the greatest mystery in physics, which proves quantum teleportation is real. What we get from the double slit experiment is non-locality, quantum entanglement, and quantum teleportation of information. In order to scale this up, we need a unification theory of quantum and macro. Time dilation is real. More mass equals slower time. Now, what I mean by this is watch the movie Interstellar. When Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway go to the planet that's near the black hole, and they come back an hour later, 20 years have gone by for the person who's on the space station. This is because when they move near the mass of the black hole, their time is slowing down. If they were to look at the space station, they would see the space station moving at a very high rate of speed relative to them, to their frame of reference. Contrarily, if the person on the space station is looking at the planet, they would see the Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway moving in slow motion. Wormholes have been shown to be theoretically possible by at least 3 scientific papers, but again, syntax is very important here. And we don't believe that what we're looking at here is a wormhole, but we do think that the effects that we're seeing are very similar and somewhat related. All these wormhole papers show that exotic material is not necessary, that you could create a thin shell, double-sided shell that could safely transport an object out of space-time. Room temperature superconductivity can be induced via metamaterials. LK99 is one example potentially, or repeated pulse vibrations from transducers. We don't think that we need metamaterials in order to achieve room temperature superconductivity. The orbs may be mapping the plane in their spherical pattern. Computer program explains the pattern. They're not being manually controlled. The orbs are a field. What we're seeing is the non-radiating boundary. This is not a solid object that we're seeing. Now, there is potentially a solid object within that boundary, but we cannot see it visually because the boundary is blocking our view. These combined orb-toroidal moments can cohere electrons. So orbs become part of the relationship with the plane, acting as electrons around the nucleus, which would be the plane, which extends unshielded electrons at the point of transition. When the electrons are driven from equilibrium, they begin to self-organize into a matter wave. Solid-state objects may be able to achieve macroscopic quantum coherence. When the orbs converge at the last minute, they create an azimuth as they collapse on the plane. The orbs converging are what's triggering the transitional phase state change of the plane. Low temperatures allow the electrons to couple and move as one in that matter wave. The fractal toroidal orb moments create a unification of forces that induce the phase singularity. The properties of an object denote the behavior regardless of size. Quantum properties may include mass reduction. Since time is a fluid symmetry, as indicated by time dilation, a faster flow of time, no inertia then equals no gravity. The plane Again, the plane and the orbs blur in the final frame, indicating acceleration and possible mass reduction, as the final frame has a slightly smaller silhouette than the frame beforehand. Less mass equals faster time, which means the ability to achieve high speeds. Zero mass objects require very little energy to move, even to the speed of light. After the phase transition, the object can be placed anywhere. It will not adhere to the laws of conservation of momentum. The technology may be capable of destroying the entire planet. And now I want to go into a little bit of Salvatore Pais science and some of the patents that he's put out there and scientific papers that will corroborate what I've just said. High-frequency gravitational waves. These can generate high-power, high-frequency gravitational waves, HFGWs, by high-frequency accelerated axial rotation, spin, and or accelerated high-frequency vibration. Gravitational wave production by propagating electromagnetic radiation through strong magnetic fields. This can enable macroscopic quantum coherence, namely possible quantum mechanical behavior of macroscopic objects. Multiple high-power, high-frequency gravitational waves were to be focused on a particular point in space-time locality, they can induce the space-time curvature singularity. Generating a gravitational well is possible in the flight path of the objects. Controlled motion of charged matter under rapid acceleration, transients may lead to room temperature superconductivity. Nuclear fusion may also be engineered. Energy may be amplified to such a high degree as to generate a space-time curvature singularity, leading to the total destruction of a planetoid or asteroid. I want to at this point reiterate that these papers predate any of my investigation, and I only became really aware of them after the investigation, after we had already put out the science that I read previously. They corroborate much of the science that I've mentioned. The next one is high energy electromagnetic field generator, HEEMFG. The artificial generation of gravity waves in the locality of the spacecraft can result in energy mass removal. It is possible to reduce a spacecraft's inertia, allowing for smooth sailing through the negative pressure, repulsive gravity of the void. The utilization of such high power sources for space power and propulsion generation. Now, that's the science part of it. The next part is, I think, what I'm part of the investigation that I'm most proud of, which is Agent 370. The identity we believe is Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn. I'm going to reiterate, the leaker is most likely U.S. military personnel, most likely an operator, probably had an emotional reaction to seeing the videos because Red decided on received the footage 4 days later after the event. They removed the HUD data. They cropped the drone out of the satellite video. They used the rainbow palette on the HUD data so that we could see more information. They likely had to convince Regicide Anon that the videos were authentic, and that's the reason for why the publish date is 8 to 9 weeks later. They may have thought they were actually looking at UFOs, only later to be revealed that it was actually U.S. technology. They potentially didn't think that they were damaging U.S. intelligence to the degree that they were. Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn was part of the Special Projects Squadron 2, the VPU-2 Wizards. He flew in the Poseidon P-8, as well as the Lockheed Martin EP-3 Ares II, which has real-time tactical SIGINT, signals intelligence again, and full motion video intelligence. The crew fuses the collected intelligence along with offboard data for battlefield situational space awareness, and Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn's specific role was to relay that information to upper command. He had a code name for the charges against him in the case against him called Rogue Archer. Every article essentially mentions signals intelligence in it. The last deployment was February 2014, but he gets reassigned March 25th, 2014, just a month later, just 2 weeks after the events of MH370 disappearing. The investigation into him began April 2nd, 2014, a week after his reassignment. His next assignment was the Brig. In May 2014, he left 2 flight manifests in his flight suit from a deployment that included search and rescue code names. The defense argued that the classified information in question is available on the internet. He was arrested in September 2015. MH370x investigators have speculated that the reason why he wasn't arrested until much later is because they were trying to throw people off the scent. If they had arrested him earlier, people would have been able to connect that he was connected to MH370. They might have even been able to connect him to the videos. There was an FBI sting against him in August of 2015, just 1 month before he was arrested. They did a honeypot, tried to get him to give information away where they could use it against him. Charges would have resulted in life in prison. First major incident of espionage by an active duty member of the U.S. Navy since the end of the Cold War. He had a heavily redacted charge sheet. We weren't able to find anything about the dates or any information about the charges. He was privy to the Navy's black program portfolio. He had top secret and compartmentalized access. On Facebook, he's friends with General Flynn. He had knowledge that could be extremely useful to potential U.S. adversaries. The government had to come out and admit that it wasn't really a spy case and that there was no evidence that he exchanged any sensitive information with anyone from China. He was abused while in pretrial detainment. The agents didn't properly advise him of either of his crimes or his right to an attorney, that he was any of the crimes he was suspected of or his right to an attorney. And the emails listed for why his pretrial detainment should be upheld, it was just fairly mundane events. It seems as though they couldn't show the real evidence for why he couldn't be released. The judge said he showed a dangerous pattern of disclosure of classified information, but didn't point to any disclosures of classified information in their judgment. The defense, all the charges against him had been obfuscated. For some reason, he was given a prostitution charge, despite the fact he was facing life in prison over espionage. After they were unable to prove the espionage case, he was essentially forced into a plea deal where he got a 9-year sentence where he admitted he accepted responsibility for just the 2 charges of mishandling classified information that he was actually guilty of. He ended up working with the NCIS and FBI and had the last 3 years of his sentence suspended. So I FOIA'd the FBI and the NCIS. My FOIA to the FBI has never been returned. My FOIA to the NCIS was returned within a week. A search of our collective databases and identified 2014 investigative report response to your request. We have carefully reviewed the documents and withheld them in total under FOIA Exemption 1. Exemption 1 protects from disclosure information about, quote unquote, matters specifically authorized under the criteria established by the executive order to be kept secret in the interest of national defense or foreign policy. This was an Obama-era executive order. Obama actually loosened FOIA requests, but only a few exemptions prevent them or allow them to be withheld. Since this wasn't a spy case, the foreign policy angle makes no sense. It most likely has to be related to national defense, which is what the technology we see in our videos implicates. Now, the disinformation angle. The videos were censored on August 19th from the subreddit UFOs. People constantly make fake compassion arguments. Trying to find the truth hurts the families of the victims. Manufactured consensus. They use sock puppet accounts to post fake content and have it get upvoted. Narrative control. Censoring those telling the truth breaks down the brainwashing. Can't have that. Forum sliding. The account that posted the VFX debunk that everybody to this day still sticks behind. It was called Icy Slide. Literally a play on words. Intelligence community forum sliding. Forum sliding is using fake accounts to post and then replying to pre-positioned postings with simple comments, such as, "Thank God this has been debunked." This brings the unrelated postings to the top of the forum list and critical postings slide down. Social contagion. Fake content spreads through word of mouth and peer pressure. Individuals adopt the beliefs as their own without even knowing the source. Many people don't even realize that the only person to have claimed to have found the VFX is a guy named Mick West. Addressing the VFX debunk, the Icy Slide account that posted it was a 1-day-old sock puppet account that did not defend anything in the post. They had to get manual approval from the moderators of the UFOs subreddit to post it. The simple answer to anyone who claims that this visual effect matches on even a single frame is to simply say, how many pixels match? To date, not a single person will answer this question because in doing so, they would have to admit that they are not a match. Even the Corridor crew says it's a perfect match, and then right after says, of course it's not a perfect match, contradicting themselves. A 2D asset would not be used in a 3D rendered environment. The videos are perfect. There's no discrepancies anywhere. Then there's no reason that they would use a low-quality 90s graphic in such masterpieces. The videos would actually still be real even if VFX matched on a single frame, which it doesn't. Prosaic comparisons of the Zap had already been included an ink drop, a supernova, an energy field, a video game from the 90s, and a donut, which actually I would argue matches better than any of the others. None of these show that the videos come from these things. There was actually an old Reddit post that they originally tried to argue that the ink drop was what our effect was for our old school investigators out there until they found a VFX that gained more traction. Most likely they're attempting to debunk the Zap because they know that they need to be able to deny the technology in order to admit that the videos are authentic, which will eventually come out. Now, addressing some of the other debunks that are out there, again, there's no discrepancies despite hundreds, if not thousands, of community individuals searching frame by frame. You need a full story to explain the videos as hoaxes, beginning with Regicide Anon somehow being in on it or otherwise lying about the date they received it 4 days after the disappearance, which is far too short for reproducing these videos. People claim the clouds don't move. They do move. They just move slowly. You can actually see the clouds move. We've proven that several times over. There is parallax. We've proven that as well. It's not daytime. It's nighttime. The smoke flows naturally. The jitters, people said there's jitters in the contrails. They're not contrails. It's smoke. There is no jittery effect. The stabilization or any editing to the videos will allow you to see things that aren't really there. You have to use the original videos. There is no duplicate frames either. That also required editing in order for them to get to look close. We've actually also proven that the duplicate frame thing, even after they modified the frames, still are not exact matches. The MQ-1C Gray Eagle does experience turbulence after flying through the wake of the plane. Prosaic debunks are all countered by the fact that there's a Citrix session logged into the actual spy satellite database indicating that the base footage is real. Now, why is this reverse engineered versus non-human intelligence or even potentially just our own technology? First of all, I just can't believe that we could be this secretly advanced without some sort of help. There's no reason to do such an extensive cover-up for just an anomalous event. Most likely, Edward C. Lin was put into prison because it is our technology. If it was just UFOs or even if it was fake, they wouldn't have thrown Edward C. Lin in prison. They wouldn't have tried to charge him for life in prison. And they certainly wouldn't have put him in prison for 9 years on a plea deal. The assets filming are both U.S. military. They either got extremely lucky filming this if it's non-human intelligence, or it's just an operation. They're filming before the orbs even appear. The orbs are moving at Mach 3 speeds, roughly 2,000 miles an hour, so the plane is not outrunning these orbs at all. The pattern is explained by a computer program. The fire event indicates a rescue motive, a human motivation. In my mind, you can't attribute human motivations to a non-human intelligence. And perhaps most importantly, science and our investigation can explain everything we see in these videos. So, people want to know, where'd they take the plane? Now, I'm going to go ahead and preface, this is all speculative at this point. I'm also going to say at this point that I want to extend the deepest condolences to the families of the victims who have been lied to and never told the truth over this whole period of time. If I had to bet, I would say that this plane somehow got to Diego Garcia military base. This base has 1,700 military personnel, 1,500 civilian personnel. Mark Dugain, Kate T, The Witness, and basically every conspiracy theory said that they flew this plane somehow to this base, but they couldn't explain how it got there. It has enough space to hide a 777. There's a Maldives sighting at roughly 6:15 a.m. local time, where the islanders see the windows and the blue and red stripe of MH370. The pilot had Diego Garcia in his simulator. It's not open to commercial aircraft. There was no departures 72 hours after March 8th, 2014, according to a Facebook post that we found. The flight logs were destroyed by water damage on Diego Garcia in July of 2014. That's pretty weird. It had underground facilities, according to a Black Vault FOIA request, that it was a CIA black site that could hold and transfer prisoners. There was a message posted from somebody claiming to be Philip Wood on the website 4chan of a black picture saying that he's being held captive, and the picture EXIF data points it at Diego Garcia military base. There's tens of millions in construction to black construction for dredging and other activities. Labor in Southeast Asia is very cheap as well. If you look at the the base in Google Earth Pro, very little changes on the surface over the last 20 years, indicating the construction is happening underground. Lockheed Martin even got a contract for upgrading power and water. There are photos of Diego Garcia that, on the Facebook page that looked vaguely similar to the crew. There's sources that claim to me that this place's magnitude is more important than Area 51. Its location makes sense. They supposedly have radar data that can see for 3,000 miles that would be capable of tracking the plane from its takeoff throughout the entire path of the plane. They also have ground-based electro-optical deep space surveillance at this base as well. One of the few sites in the world that has this. Now, what about the passengers? The families of the victims never believed the official story. A lot of them are on CNN and other large news organizations months after the event, saying that they never believed the official story. Settlements likely forced the families into silence. In the United States, there was a lawsuit that was put in against Boeing and against Malaysian Airlines. And the judge that ruled against this lawsuit being tried in the United States is now Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. If the passengers survived, they could have been returned to their home countries in exchange for their silence. Some could have been living in Diego Garcia. The American passenger, Philip Wood, most likely would have gone into witness protection and assumed a new identity. According to Florence Changi's investigation, a nephew of the pilot was told that his uncle was quote-unquote collateral damage. The French father was told that there was 2 AWACS in the area, and the Americans knew exactly what happened to the plane. A former head of Indonesian police was told what really happened to the plane by his counterpart in Malaysia. So I want to thank you guys all for listening to this version of All Evidence. Now,